There are really no words to describe how the St. Louis Cardinals have been playing baseball other than terrible, horrible. Um, these are unprecedented times for the St. Louis Cardinals. We're going to try to help you get through it. We are, waking up on, May 10th. I'm recording this on May 10th in the early afternoon. And you probably woke up this morning and you're probably thinking, it can't get much worse than this for the St. Louis Cardinals. If you would have told me before the season started that the offense would be this bad and that Paul Goldschmidt would look like not a Major League Baseball player anymore, I would have told you you were crazy at the beginning of the season. I mean, I made a video about bold predictions for the St. Louis Cardinals where I thought they had a legitimate chance to win the NL Central. And based on what was on paper, based on the talent, hell, I think one of these publications, I can't remember if it was Fangraphs or CBS, or had the St. Louis Cardinals winning the NL Central. And according to what you saw on paper, what this team had to offer, what they were able to do during the offseason, I get it. They weren't the sexiest signings in the world, but it was Sonny Gray, it was Lance Lynn, it was Kyle Gibson. It was addressing the key problem that you had last year, right? A lack of innings. Jack Flaherty wasn't pitching deep enough in the ball games. Neither was Adam Wainwright, right? Matthew Liberatore wasn't very good last year as a starting pitcher. He had moments, but the Cardinals struggled to find innings, and that's what they addressed during the offseason. They added Matt Carpenter, Brendan Crawford, and those moves in hindsight make you feel like maybe they should have done more to add a position player, but nobody was complaining about the Cardinals' lack of offense. If we were complaining about those moves, the Matt Carpenter move, the Brendan Crawford move, we were complaining about it because maybe we felt that one of our prospects, or certainly there had to be somebody else out there that could help this ball club more than Brendan Crawford or Matt Carpenter. I mean, Tommy Pham, I think, would have been a perfect example of somebody that could have been brought back. I know that there's a history there with Tommy Pham. I don't know the ins and outs of it. That is just what I've heard, but I don't know if he would have been interested in coming back to St. Louis. But you get the point. The point is, and still is, that the Cardinals offense was not the problem. And nobody was complaining in the offseason about the Cardinals' lack of moves in the offseason because we assumed players like Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado would be their all-star caliber selves. And even Nolan Arenado, you look at his numbers and the OPS is 741. That's not what we're used to. Sure, he's hitting 286, but he's only hit 2 home runs, 20 RBIs. He leads the team in RBIs. And of course, I need to get to what is the biggest news. When it rains, it pours. When you're down, somebody kicks you, right? Pouring salt into the wound, and that's Willson Contreras, because there's no doubt Willson Contreras was having one of his better seasons offensively and was the Cardinals' best hitter offensively with a 949 OPS, right? A 280 batting average, 6 home runs. He led the club in home runs. Sure, he strikes out a lot, but so has Paul Goldschmidt, so has Nolan Gorman. Like, he was the best offensive player the Cardinals had. I mean, leader in a number of statistical categories like home runs, OPS, on base percentage, you name it, slugging percentage. And now he gets injured when he was super close to the plate. And to be fair, like, I've heard all sorts of different perspectives on this, and I'll just give mine. Initially, how I thought or what happened. I I'm struggling to find a play that looked like that play. I'm struggling to find a play where a catcher gets hit in the hand, or not even in the hand, in the forearm. I mean, he fractured his arm, and according to a report I saw today, he's going to be out at least 10 weeks, which is not, uncommon. I mean, that's basically what we expected to happen. But I've never quite seen a play like that. And I get it, JD Martinez is in the back of the box, but all players, the first thing that a lot of those players do is they go up, and that chalk that the umpire, that the grounds crew puts out there as the batter's box. They go up there and they just wipe that away and they step as far back in that batter's box as possible. And supposedly what happened was the Cardinals were trying to get Willson Contreras to scoot up as far as possible to get those low strikes. Point of emphasis coming from the St. Louis Cardinals had their best player, put their best player potentially in harm's way to try to get those low strikes. And to be fair to the St. Louis Cardinals, not in 1,000,000,000 years did they think that JD Martinez would hit Willson Contreras in the arm and break his arm and cause him to be out until probably the All-Star break. But that's what happened. And when it rains, it pours. And the St. Louis Cardinals share some blame in this. For me, I think it's a terrible, terrible thing that yes, of course you're going to instruct your catcher to give your pitchers an edge to scoot up as close as possible. Um, that's just something that you're going to do. The Cardinals are not alone in doing that, but it looks bad when Wilson. It's just compounding a problem that's been a problem in this organization for a long time. It's like in a vacuum or in a singular moment, the Willson Contreras injury wouldn't have been as big of a deal as it is right now. What makes it a big deal is the fact that he's your only hitter that's producing at an elite level. He's the only one, and you had last year, right? 2023 was a disaster, and it looks like 2024 is going to be a disaster. And nobody else is hitting, and you haven't developed starting pitching, and it looks like these younger players that were supposed to be the future of the St. Louis Cardinals. I'm talking about Jordan Walker, who's down in the minor leagues, Nolan Gorman, Lars Nootbaar, he hit a home run last night, Brendan Donovan. All these players are struggling. And so it's not just about Willson Contreras, like sometimes when I'm mad and sometimes when other people are mad, it's not about, me dropping a mug and breaking it on the floor. It's not about spilling a drink. It's not about the singular moment. It's not about the single thing that happened. It's about the moments that led up to that moment that caused the the straw to break the camel's back. And it really feels like the Willson Contreras injury is the straw that broke the camel's back for the St. Louis Cardinals season. And we're sitting here on May 10th. I understand it's May 10th. I understand that I said you need to give it to at least Memorial Day. I understand that. But when I see the game that I saw last night, where the Cardinals just look for the first time to me, just utterly like we've lost this game. If Sonny Gray cannot be good, we have lost. And we're not going to be able to score runs. We're not going to be able to keep up with the Brewers if they score. It was pathetic. It was pathetic. And I don't think there's any other words for it. When Paul Goldschmidt, and I was talking to some friends about this and about the Cardinals, when Paul Goldschmidt looks so lost at the plate that he strikes out on a pitch that is 3 feet in the other batter's box. I mean, come on. What's going on with Paul Goldschmidt? I love Paul Goldschmidt. I thought before the season it might have been a good idea to extend him. Now, thank God they didn't do that. And when you start to look at this franchise and where they're spending their money, it's just a microcosm of errors. It's just errors on top of errors on top of errors, and it all led to this pivotal moment where Willson Contreras breaks his arm because you've instructed him to move up as close as possible to get that low strike when really pitching has not been your problem. It hasn't been. I mean, the pitching hasn't been spectacular, but we never expected it to be. And now you're wondering, like, as a Cardinals fan, you're wondering, how does it get better? And the only way that it gets better is if the Cardinals start hitting. And it really does not look like the Cardinals are going to start hitting. So what's this going to lead to? Again, this stretch of 10 games, starting with the White Sox, losing 2 out of 3 to the White Sox, then losing 2 to the Mets, and then that game on May 8th got rained out, and then you lose to the Brewers in relatively uncompetitive fashion. I said that these 10 games, the White Sox series, the Mets series, and the Brewer series leading into the Angels were pivotal games because you could have taken at least two or three from the White Sox. The Mets are a beatable team, but you lost 2 games there, and now you're already behind the 8 ball in the Brewers series where, like, you could have gained some momentum heading into that series, and now it just feels like you're just trying to survive. You're just trying to stay in it. It's not about winning this. I mean, obviously you wanna win the series, but it's not really about that. It's about just trying to eke out games and win and however you can win. And it's just doesn't look good for the St. Louis Cardinals at all, and it's super frustrating. But I will say this, as a Cardinals fan, and you as a Cardinals fan, because you're listening to this podcast, you have a decision to make. You can either, check out. There's a lot of baseball left. You can say, "Oh, they're terrible. I can't watch it." And to be fair, it's a tough watch right now. It's maybe the toughest watch in my lifetime being a St. Louis Cardinals fan. However, I would say this: baseball is my favorite sport. This is why I do this podcast. I love baseball. I love watching baseball. And I have to believe, I have to believe that there's going to be some good that comes out of this season. I don't know if that's Jordan Walker emerging as a future superstar like we thought he was going to be. He's down in the minors right now, hopefully working on his game, hopefully becoming the kind of player that we thought he could be. He's only 21 years old. Nolan Gorman, same story. We all had high hopes for him entering this season, and I have to believe that there's too much talent there for him to fail this badly, uh, like heading into the future. What I will say, if the Cardinals decide to tear this down, and I think it's still too early to do that, if they do decide to tear it down, the best example of how to do that is in your division right now with the Chicago Cubs. And I hate to even bring up the Chicago Cubs in a St. Louis Cardinals podcast, but they were in this very same situation when they traded Anthony Rizzo, when they traded Javi Baez, when they traded Chris Bryant away. The fans were not happy with that. Many people thought the Cubs could keep those guys and still be competitive, but it might be time for some of these older veterans to go. I'm talking about Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt. I would think for sure. I don't know if you can really get anything for Paul Goldschmidt right now the way he's playing, but these are the decisions I think you're going to have to make. But the problem, the problem is John Mozeliak and his staff going to be in charge? And I would venture to say yes. And I think that's a problem. Because I think if you're going to do this, I don't know if you can trust John Mozeliak to do it. They haven't developed starting pitching. They haven't really. I mean, look at the developmental process this year. It doesn't look good with Jordan Walker. It hasn't looked good in the past with other prospects. I think there's a desperate need for new faces. There's a desperate need for a fresh perspective. And I do think there's a way for the Cardinals to gracefully usher John Mozeliak out. This has been a very successful tenure as a president of baseball operations, as a general manager for John Mozeliak, but it just feels like there needs to be some fresh perspective and some fresh leadership. It just really feels as though the Cardinals need a fresh voice, a fresh perspective in the front office. I think the fans, like, again, I think that would mean a lot to the fans, and I get it. The fans' input in front office decisions or changes in leadership oftentimes goes overlooked, or they don't consider that. But you look at the what's really startling to me is the attendance, the lack of people in the stands. And according to Bernie Michaelis, according to some other people, that really bothers Bill DeWitt. So we'll see if that actually happens. I think that would send a clear message to the fans that we are serious about making changes to this ball club. And I think that's really the only move left in the arsenal. It might be the only option left for Bill DeWitt, assuming this season continues down the path that that it's projecting to go down, where the Cardinals are 15-22 and they're in last place in the NL Central. Again, for the second year in a row, they're in last place. And so that would, to me, be the best move that the Cardinals can make. And I don't know if they're going to make it or not, But I think you need to consider that. I do because the St. Louis Cardinals, with their rich history, they have some of the best fans in baseball that show up every night, and now they're starting not to do that, and you wonder why. And I don't necessarily believe it's because the team is bad. Does that contribute to it? Sure, that contributes to it. But really, the reason why I believe fans are not showing up to the ballpark is they believe that the Cardinals management has been bad for the last couple of years. They believe that the team is not making moves that are going to help the team win, not just in the present but in the long term as well. They're not spending money wisely, and the fans, quite frankly, are right about that. The extending Miles Michaelis looks like a bad deal. I mean, aside from the contracts of Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado, which are eating up a lot of the salary. I mean, you have to consider the moves that have been made up to this point. Again, it's just a microcosm. It's just a buildup of frustration year after year after year. And this is also a lesson that I hope the Cardinals can learn in the future as well. I hope that they learn that these windows, that they can't just take these winning windows for granted in baseball. You just can't do it anymore, because when you have a window to potentially not only win the division but win the World Series, you have to be willing to go out and potentially overpay for that piece that puts you over the top, and that's something the Cardinals have never done. Never. They have gone out and filled a need when they've had a need, but they haven't made the move that you can point to. Unless somebody can let me know in the comments or in the chat, when was the last time the St. Louis Cardinals made a move like going out and signing John Lester or going out and trading for Aroldis Chapman like the Cubs did, like your division rival did? When they saw an opportunity to win the World Series, that's what they did. They pushed the chips in, and the Cardinals have never done that. Not at the trade deadline, not in the offseason. Sure, trading for Paul Goldschmidt, trading for Nolan Arenado, those are good moves to bring in a superstar into town that can help your ball club. It hasn't helped them as much as it probably should have, but it helps, right? Star power is good. But you name me the move, the starting pitcher that they brought in, the relief pitcher that they brought in to lock down the later innings, the impact bat that they brought in to help propel them into the playoffs. It's never happened with the St. Louis Cardinals. Tell me a risk that they took that benefited them. They haven't. That move is doesn't come to mind in recent history. Outside of, I get it, Jordan Montgomery at the trade deadline was good. Jose Quintana was a good move at the trade deadline. Those are not what we would consider impact players. Jordan Montgomery became that for another team in the when we traded him away, but that was a trade at the deadline that I don't think the Yankees perceived his value to be at that level. Uh, Nobody really did. I mean, they got him for Harrison Bader. In hindsight, that's a great trade, right? That John Mozeliak was able to make. But you name me the impact player the Cardinals added during this window, during the 2000, the mid 2000s. So you can look back in like 2014, 2015, 2016. The Cardinals had some good teams, really good teams, and they just never really pushed their chips in to the middle of the table and said, we are all in to win this year. And they should have, because I hope that that's a lesson that they take away. These windows, we should not take them for granted. We shouldn't take for granted that the Central is bad, because guess what? The Central's not bad anymore. The Cubs are good. The Cubs are back. And that's the model. I think that's the model the Cardinals need to look at if they go down the rebuilding road, because that worked. They transformed their franchise basically in 2 years. I don't think they can rest on their laurels and go, oh, we're the St. Louis Cardinals, because I think all of those moves, like, and we could go down the list of bad moves that they've made. In most recent history, it's Steven Matz, it's extending Miles Michaelis, right? It's the Matt Carpenter extension, Brett Cecil. Like, we could go on down the line of impact moves that they probably thought were impact moves that were actual disasters, bringing in Greg Holland, spending 10 million on him. These are all moves that look like, and I'm convinced too that these are moves that are meant to sort of like go like be on the cheaper side too, of filling a need, of getting a bargain, but in actuality, in life too, you could spend half as much money and get a product that's inferior and it's going to last you, you know, maybe couple years, 3 years. Or you could spend the money and get you something that's going to last 10 plus years. And the Cardinals have gone the cheap route in that regard. They go for the Brett Cecils, they go for the Steven Matz of the world. And to be fair, it's not about spending money in Major League Baseball. It really isn't. It's about how the Cardinals have spent their money. That's the problem. They're spending $99 million on starting pitching this year. And now you it's like you plug a hole and then two more spring up. Like that's just the reality of baseball. Did we think that the holes would spring up as as quickly as they did this year and as many holes spring up as they did this year? No, nobody thought that. And that's we need to be fair to the Cardinals in that respect because nobody thought that this offense would be this terrible, like I've said. But it goes to when your organization is built this way, when it's very the prospects that you are bringing up are with the major league team and you have so much emphasis on the offense and then you feel like you plug the holes in pitching, there's no room for error here, especially with the starting pitching rotation. I mean, Steven Matz goes down, they bring in Matthew Liberatore who was doing well in the bullpen, and that's the only solution. They don't have somebody that they can bring up from AAA, right? So this really feels like a team that just needs a reset, a reset, a recalibration, just a new perspective, somebody new leading the baseball operations. But let me know what you think in the comments. And again, just to pivot to what's coming up on tap, this is Friday, May 10th. The Cardinals are in the middle of a 4-game series on the road with the Milwaukee Brewers. They go to Los Angeles rather, to play the Angels, and then they come back home against the Red Sox, the Baltimore Orioles, and then their first series with the Cubs, which I'm kind of dreading, by the way, because the Cardinals are bad, the Cubs are good. It's not great. It's all is not right with the world. That shouldn't happen. But hey, here we are. And the good news is we have baseball, right? And baseball is awesome. So click the like button, subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this. My name is Seth Dewald. You can follow me on Twitter at Seth_DIEWOLD. You can follow the show at Believe in St. Louis Cardinals on Twitter. And until next time, be good, everybody, and let's go Redbirds.